there's about equal chance of them, you know, pulling it off.
But there's some really, I mean, I think in your 3 years, there's some really inventive storytelling that I think that had been missing from the show for a little while. And I felt like the show had been invigorated, I think, creatively.
Well, I hope so, because I came from a sort of science fiction background. I was a science fiction fan when I was a kid, then I sort of expanded my reading to, you know, trash like Dostoevsky and things like that. And, but I still loved science fiction and sort of had a feel for it. And I always give credit to Alan Moore, because when I came into the Doctor Who job, I was just in the white heat of reading his greatest run of graphic novels. There were things like Watchmen, which everybody's heard of, but also The Swamp Thing, which was fantastic. It's very much in this part of the world, come to think of it.
Right.
And Halo Jones, which is lesser known, but a very good science fiction series he did with a female hero. So all this stuff was in my head, and I thought, this is the kind of story that would work on Doctor Who, this kind of approach to things, sort of slightly more modern, slightly more hip, but science fiction literate. Because that's one of the things that bothered me about some of the other older Who stuff, is that it wasn't really science fiction, it was just, you know, I think you have to sort of, even if you're going to not do science fiction straight, you've got to know what it should look like. So I sort of have that background. And also I got some great writers. Ben Aronovich, he just sent a script in, and I read the script. It was called Nightfall with a K, like, you know, A Night on Shining Armor. And so it just begins with Dr. Nace and the TARDIS, and there's this weird sound. And he says, what's that? And the doctor says, oh, it's the phone. And she says, I thought, well, this is great. This guy, as soon as I read it, I knew that this guy could do it. Just, you know, this gag about the phone. So I remember riding home on the train that weekend for my weekend off, and I had this script, and I thought, this is going to be great. And we kind of did, which is, you know, usually these things never do, but it paid off because Ben wrote some fantastic scripts for us.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Okay, I have a question that I've always wondered about. In the 3 seasons that you did, there is one story each season, which is basically about a inward-grown, self-contained society in some form.
So and it's Paradise Towers, the Happiness Patrol, and
the third one. Ghostlight.
Ah, very interesting. Yeah.
And so was that an intentional thing, or was it just was that just picked from what you received, or did you go for that kind of?
I wasn't aware of that pattern, but often you're not aware of things till afterwards. Because, and also the weird thing is that when you're scripting a show, suddenly you see like the same thing happening in 2 different scripts, and you think, did I give some kind of subliminal signal on this, or is it just like everybody kind of gets into a group think sort of thing? And you suddenly say, hang on, you can't do that scene because another writer's doing this. So you're often not aware of the deeper patterns that are happening. Until you pointed that out, I didn't really realize that. I mean, partly the Happiness Patrol and Ghostlight, those are both all studio, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. So that adds to the fact that they're...
That's true, that's true.
They're combined.
But that's a case where being a studio-bound story, you know, it
feeds into it.
Yeah, it really does, and it sort of feeds into the strength of those stories. You did I don't know how much of this you were involved in, but there was some interesting things, the balance between studio and location work, where even budgetarily, 2 of the stories would be counted, the 2 3-parters would usually be counted as 1 6-parter, and divided up where one is almost purely location.
The way that used to work was John actually only had the budget to do 3 stories per season, and one of them was supposed to be a 6-parter. And he understood very rightly that 6-parters are very cumbersome and tend to be the least good stories. So what he would do is he would say, okay, we can split this up into 2 3-parters, do one all in the studio, one all on location, instead of a 6-parter that's a mix. And that worked very nicely, and that way we got 4 stories per season instead of 3, and they were better lengths, because 3 episodes is very good, it's like a 3-act structure. 4 isn't bad, but 5 or 6 begins to get a bit weird. So it was John's cleverness with money that gave us much richer.
He was sort of an accounting genius, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he came up from an accounting background. It's called a studio, I think they call them studio managers or something. Anyway, that was his background. That's one of the routes up to becoming a producer. Right. So he came up on the accounting side, so he knew how to stretch a pound.
The story goes that when, back in the Tom Baker years, he was in that role, and when they did City of Death, it was going to cost them like literally a couple of £100 less to go to Paris and film on location than it would be to recreate Paris
Wasn't that a beautiful scam? He managed to get
Exactly.
everything.
So he got Paris vacations for the crew and saved money at the same time.
As I was saying, financial genius. I'm not sure how much money he saved, but they had a good time.
And that's all that matters.